Founded as the Nihon Sangyo Holding Company in 1928, the name would soon be abbreviated to Nissan. In 1931, automobile manufacturer DAT, maker of the Datsun Type 11, became affiliated with Tabata Casting, which was part of Nissan, leading to the creation of Nissan Motors a few years later, with cars beginning to appear carrying the Nissan brand in 1937, starting with the Model 70. Built under license, it was based on the American Graham-Paige, soon to be followed by Graham-based trucks and buses, making Nissan a premium and commercial brand above Datsun. After the war, it was the truck production that expanded, including the 4W60 Patrol, still based on Graham architecture, but four-wheel drive and styled to look like a World War II Jeep. And it was followed by the 4W70 truck, basically a Dodge Power Wagon with Nissan running gear. While cars had become Austins, built under license, selling as the Nissan Austin. But the focus for the period remained the cheaper, higher-volume Datsuns that would be updated from what they learned from Austin, including advancing the development of their engines. And Nissan would purchase Minsai Diesel in 1960 to form Nissan Diesel, moving them fully into the commercial truck market. They would also start selling cars in the U.S., but only the smaller Datsun models. The premium Nissan would return that same year with the Cedric, which was the first Datsun-based Nissan, 174 inches long on a 100-inch wheelbase, and 26 to 2,700 pounds, initially powered by a 1.5 or 1.9-liter 4 with 70 or 83 horsepower. Soon a diesel version was added, and in 1963, a more upmarket 6-cylinder version as the Cedric Special, which would be spun off as its own model, being renamed President and gaining a V8. Although the Cedric would become a bit of a redundant product when Nissan merged with Prince in 1964, a World War II aircraft company that started building the Tama Electric after the war. Its name would change many times before the merger, but would bring the likes of the Skyline and Gloria under the Nissan banner. The sporty Silvia was introduced in 1965, which also sold as the Datsun 1600 Coupe. Shortly after, Nissan would introduce their first all-new in-house engine design, the Overhead Cam L series, inspired by the Mercedes engine of the same period, and it would be their primary power source for the next 20 years. By 1968, the Prince model name had pretty much been phased out of passenger cars and trucks. The same time, the Nissan Laurel arrived as a junior version of the Gloria, sort of fitting between the Skyline and the Datsun Bluebird. A year later, they would start offering the Cherry Cab, also called the Datsun Sunny Cab, a cab-over-truck version of the compact Datsun B10 sedan and pickup. The same time, the Skyline GTR first appeared, not the first performance version of the Skyline. Powered by an 160 horsepower 2-liter, it was a step up from the previous 2000 GT, and starting in 1970, was offered as a coupe. Less than 2,000 would be made from 1969 to 1972. But the car that really put Nissan on the map was the Fairlady Z of the same year, which came to the U.S. as the Datsun 240Z. Initially sold as a 2-liter with 128 horsepower, but the 2.4-liter 240 bumped that to 148 horsepower. Aimed at European sports cars, it could do a high 16-second quarter mile and top 115 miles an hour, starting at just over $3,500. And it helped Datsun Nissan become the leader among Japanese companies in both Europe and North America. In 1971, the similar Gloria and Cedric became variations of the same model, and although the Skyline would continue on, the GTR would be canceled after 1973, with fewer than 200 of the second generation being built. But after 7 years, the Silvia returned for 1975, coming to the U.S. as the Datsun 200SX. For 1978, the Fairlady Z was restyled and moved up market to become the 280ZX, the same time that the Cherry Cab was replaced by the Vanette. Then in 1980, the Leopard was introduced in an attempt to move Nissan further up market. But it was around this time that Nissan began manufacturing cars in the U.S., and the Datsun brand was starting to be phased out with the full line of products moving under the Nissan brand. The Datsun Sunny or 210 became the Nissan Sentra in the US. The 310 or Cherry became the Pulsar. The 510 Bluebird was replaced by the Stanza, and the 810 became the Maxima. While the Silvia was still the 200SX in the US, and the 720 pickup would be the last to give up the Datsun badge. Most were sold under other names as well in other locations, but most of the traditional Nissan-branded vehicles still didn't come to the US. They would, however, continue to be the leading imported brand throughout most of Europe. Only the NX version of the Pulsar would carry on in the US, and elsewhere it would be replaced by the Micra. There was a new Fairlady Z for 1983 as the 300ZX, introducing their first mass-produced V6, and disappointing Z-car purists. In 1986, Nissan introduced the popular hardbody pickup with its double-walled bed, and there would be a wagon version as the new Pathfinder. The transition into the 90s would see numerous revisions to Nissan's performance image. The 200SX would move up market as the 240SX, the Skyline GTR returned, now with all-wheel drive and much greater production numbers, nearly 45,000 over the first 5 years. The more mundane Skylines had remained in production the whole time, but neither were offered in the US. There would also be a new 300ZX, and the Pulsar NX would be redesigned as simply the NX. But the big news was the creation of the new Infiniti luxury division, which included the Q45 flagship, based on the V8 Nissan President, and the M30, which was essentially a Nissan Leopard. In 1993, the export version of the Bluebird changed its name from Stanza to Altima, and the Quest minivan was introduced. But the sporty models would start disappearing. First the NX, then the ZX, and soon the SX, or both of them, as the sporty version of the Sentra had taken over the 200SX designation. But the Skyline GTR would go into its fourth generation in 1995. The next generation compact pickup arrived in 1997, now called the Frontier in the US, and built in Tennessee. And as the Pathfinder moved up market, the more off-roady Xterra was introduced in 1999. But in spite of sales successes, Nissan was facing financial difficulties, and formed an alliance with the French company Renault. It would also be around this time that their line of sedans would shift up market. First the Altima in 1998, then the Sentra in 2000, followed by the Maxima in 2004, making room for the smaller Versa that year. And the Z-car returned in 2002 as the 350Z, with the Murano crossover arriving the next year, followed a year later by the full-size Titan pickup and similar Armada wagon. In 2008, the Rogue replaced the compact X-Trail that had been introduced in 2000, and the sports car would be upgraded to become the 370Z. Starting in 2009, the Skyline and GTR became two separate models, and the year after that, Nissan Diesel became UD trucks. The next year, they would get creative with things like the unusually styled Juke, and by bringing the convertible back to the SUV market with the topless Murano, and by introducing the fully electric Leaf, making them an early leader in the segment. Around the same time, their line of vans started to shift to NV nomenclature, or Nissan Van. In the US, that would be the large commercial NV starting in 2012, followed by the compact NV200, which would eventually replace the Quest. And their commercial trucks would follow a similar pattern, using NT, or Nissan Truck. In 2016, Nissan purchased a major stake in Mitsubishi, pulling them into the Nissan-Renault alliance, helping make it one of the largest global producers of light vehicles. The Juke would be replaced by the much more conservative Kicks in 2018, as it had become part of a more important market segment for the company. And naturally, a fully electric SUV would be introduced in 2023, the Ayera. At the same time, the Maxima was discontinued, partially due to the declining sedan market, and partially due to its increased similarity to the cheaper Altima. Surprisingly, there would be a new Fairlady Z, now just called the Nissan Z in export markets. But the Nissan-Renault alliance has been facing many difficulties the last few years, and although its future may be in question, it is likely to remain intact for the foreseeable future. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.